The Department of Employment and Labour has appealed to employers to use the prescriptions of the Occupational Health and Safety Act of 1993 in governing workplaces in relation to the coronavirus disease COVID-19. The department has been conducting inspection blitzes to ensure that regulations for the lockdown are not flouted. Aggy Moiloa is the Inspector General from the Department of Employment and Labour, and she joins us now live on the line. Good afternoon to you, Moiloa. Thank you so much for joining us here on the SABC News channel. So, firstly, explain to us the basics that the department look for during this blitz operations.
Good afternoon, Talisa, and to the rest of listeners and viewers. Basically, what we look for is compliance with, first of all, the COVID regulations, the issue of social distancing, the issue of providing workers with the right protective clothing, but specifically as a department, we also look into the whole issue of whether workplaces have got risk assessments that are responsive to the COVID-19, as is offered in the employment, in the Occupational Health and Safety under hazardous biological agents. So that would be our starting point, really, to look at the risk assessment, analyze them, and see whether they're responsive to the COVID-19 restrictions, among others.
And what have you found as the department during your visits, really, to the different companies in terms of this risk assessment analysis that you're referring to?
Okay. Currently, we are sitting at about just over 330 workplaces that is inspected over the past 5 days, and the compliance levels are sitting at about 55%. What we found to be pervasive in terms of our findings is that the issue of social distancing in some instances becomes a problem. And the issue of also having barriers, where, particularly in retail, where you find cashiers have got to be serving customers on a continuous basis. So there's got to be some kind of a barrier, and there's got to be provision for making sure that they sanitize. So those are among the key findings that we've come across.
But what are you attributing that to? Is it just lack of knowledge, or is it just pure ignorance from the employer side?
I think it's a combination of factors. I mean, why we cannot plead ignorance? Because right from the onset, what we did as a department is to publish some guidelines with regards to occupational health and safety. And we believe that that was widely done. And we also found that there's just, human nature where what people are supposed to be doing, they do not do it. So it's a culture of OHS that is not there in most instances, where you find that people wait for enforcement mechanisms before they comply. So it's something that we've been grappling with for quite a number of times, and including this period, that when you look at occupational health and safety as a culture in workplaces, it really leaves a lot to be desired.
So what happens in an instance where these workplaces are not adhering to the guidelines as set, and perhaps the precautionary measures against the COVID-19? What happens in such instances?
Yeah, it depends on the nature of the flouting of the law. If, for instance, there aren't gloves when they're supposed to be gloves and masks, I mean, we'll assess the situation, and each business place or workplace will be different. So we assess each workplace on its merits. Where the feeling is that we should be giving a contravention notice, we do that, and then we give companies 48 hours to comply. But where we would assess that there's immediate danger, like for instance, I need to say, Talisa, that at this point in time, we do coordinated inspections. So we've got SAPS, we've got the DTI, and we've got Home Affairs, because there are instances where you find that the rule of not more than 100 in a particular place is being flouted. And also you may find that the issue of social distancing is being flouted. So on that score, will then issue out prohibition notices where we see that there's immediate danger and the risk is greater for human life. Because remember, the spirit of occupational health and safety is to take care not only of the workers, but also whoever is in that space. So it is a retail place, it will include also customers that are there at a point in time.
But at the same time, whose responsibility is it to ensure that employees use their protective clothing, or what they call the PPEs? And what happens in Memulo in an instance where these employees, or rather employers, have done their part, but employees would not use those protective clothing?
The responsibility is a shared responsibility. The employer has got to make sure that the employees that are within their jurisdiction have got to comply with regulations. And also it is a duty of the employee themselves to make sure that they also protect themselves. So you cannot replace advocacy really, and also management. Policies themselves, companies themselves have got to have in-house policies that enforce these things, so that where there's non-compliance with PPEs, for instance, it can avail and find that people are not using them. Then their own policies should enable them to take action, corrective action to deal with it.
But have you perhaps received any complaints from employees reporting their employers who would not adhere and comply with the regulations? Have you received such?
It is not a usual complaint because remember, the employer will be in a position of authority. So they should be able to manage their own employees and make sure that there's adherence to the safety regulations. And employees themselves, that is why for most of the workplaces there's supposed to be a health and safety committee that is supposed to also advocate on the issues of health and safety. So we can't imagine a situation where an employer will just plead, that I can't take charge of my own situation. The expectation is that you should be able to manage your workplace, because remember, the buck stops with the employer.
So seeing that
Section 8 of the OSUS is quite clear on that score, that employers have got to make sure that their own workplaces are compliant to the prescripts of OHS.
All right. So seeing that you've only been able to visit about 380 workplaces, I would believe that would see more of such operations going forward during this period and perhaps beyond?
Yes, most certainly. And this is nationwide, I need to add, and we're so serious about the whole thing, what will rally behind the call that the president has made. And in instances where there's deliberate flouting of the law, there's one case where one employer was arrested. So we're taking this whole thing very, very seriously.
All right.
So going forward, we're going to be continuing the blitzes, but for the duration of the COVID-19, we'll be doing exactly that.
All right, we'll certainly be in touch with you for more regarding that. Thank you so much for talking to us. That's Aggy Moiloa. She's the Inspector General from the Department of Employment and Labour, talking to us about the blitz operations that the department has had. As she said, they've been able to visit about 380 workplaces in the country. 65% of those visited were found to be compliant to all the regulations. 25% obviously not. But as she said, the operations continue.